If you're even slightly an otaku, you know that numerous anime series use the occult for inspiration. Starting with the iconic Neon Genesis Evangelion and proceeding to more modern like the Fate universe, the examples are so many, I doubt I ever watched them all. Nonetheless, I believe one title stands out regarding balancing fiction with actual magical concepts. Made by JC Staff, that's none other than my favorite Toaru-Project. After watching it about 10 times, I decided to break down parts of it as a student of the Esoteric. I also got some inspiration for this from Gigguk, who uses his knowledge in electronic and electrical engineering to explain segments of the anime. With this said, let me introduce you to Toaru's world by discussing its setting and focusing on the series, since I am new to the manga. Toaru-Project is a light novel by Kazuma Kamachi, which was adopted as an anime in the early 2000s. It is presented into 3 different stories intertwining with each other: Index, Railgun, and Accelerator. Toaru-Project takes place in Academy City, a unique research and student city located west of Tokyo. A few decades more advanced than the rest of the world, Academy City is home to Magick, Science, and even Crowley, whom we will discuss in a moment. In a nutshell, Academy City is the biggest and baddest training facility for magicians and espers with supernatural psychic abilities. On some occasions, espers and magicians are in conflict. Most often they join forces to defend their community and Academy City. Academy City also has its dark side. Much of its progress is based on experimenting with living children and clones, leaving them dead or handicapped. Also noteworthy is that unless they are an esper, magician, or part of the governing board, a person is nothing in the city's hierarchy despite their talent, intellect, and work ethic. Magick and Science. Academy City is the perfect symbol of magic and science. This brings us to its sworn enemy, the Roman Catholic Church, which I believe represents the Abrahamic religions. Since the beginning of time, organized religion has chased magicians and scientists. According to modern occultists like one Maiuduket, this was the main reason esoteric societies kept their practices secret. On the other hand, magic and science were actually one in the past, and examples are people like John Dee and Giordano Bruno. Magic and science were both given to humanity by Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus. And as Dr. Christopher Hart, who was quite a bit of both a magician and scientist, liked to say, quote, "Magic has a lot more common with science than it does with religion. Magic and science are both active. Religion is passive." End quote. The second to address here is the dynamic between magic and science in the face of magicians and espers. Around the 18th minute of episode 2 of Index season 1, we learned that magic was invented by people who recognized and wanted to possess esper powers but couldn't. Hence, it wasn't meant to be used by people with such a gift. And when that happens, they get very unhealthy side effects like Tsuchimikaro in Index season 1 episode 17. In Toaru's world, magic and psychic abilities are mutually exclusive. Unlike psychic abilities, which are some of a genetic predisposition to further establish with the help of science, magic is a skill you must develop. Later in the same season, Crowley explains that the world remains safe because of science and magic not fighting each other, which is what Academy City is all about. In contrast to organized religions based on passivity, obedience, and unquestionable dogmas, magic and science test things empirically via experiments. The difference in the real world is that while scientists tend to get objective results more often, magicians' conclusions and outcomes are usually subjective and even non-identical. Both magic and science teach their students to be skeptical, actively questioning whether something is or isn't. In the anime, this is depicted in the training of espers. This brings us to another interesting, Crowley's ultimate weapon, who is one of the main characters. Named Toma Kamijo, this guy can cancel magical and esper powers temporarily. Also worth mentioning is Crowley calling himself a scientist in the same season, episode 21. I believe this undoubtedly is inspired by a famous saying of real-life Crowley. Quote, "We place no reliance on virgin or pigeon, our method is science, our aim is religion." End quote. To those wanting to learn more about that, I recommend Robert Anton Wilson's lectures on Crowley and the article by Rodney Orpheus, The Method of Science, The Aim of Religion. Index, the Living Grimoire Library. One of the main characters, Index, is a little nun with an exceptional photographic memory. Index's mind is divided into two. 15% handle day-to-day living, whereas the other 85% comprise an enormous magical library containing 103,000 grimoires. This includes the Book of Death, which I assume is the Egyptian Book of Death, covering methods for preserving consciousness after physical death and thus obtaining immortality. In real life, grimoires are basically the original books on magic. Also called spellbooks, grimoires includes instructions on charging objects and conjuring spirits. Usually, they are associated with the times before societies like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Originating in France, grimoire magic can be compared to Harry Potter since it mainly employs spells and words of power. This is what the term grimoire essentially means. It is a textbook with text the operator pronounces to obtain particular ends. The Key of Solomon is often considered the most famous grimoire in real life. Episode 3 of this same season notes that grimoires could be dangerous due to being full of unconventional ideas altering the, quote, basic laws of nature. This reminds me of some authors' recommendations to not mess with the grimoires before having proficiency in working with the elements. Considering that Style Magnus, another main character who primarily works with fire, defines the grimoires as, quote, different and toxic world, this also reminds me of Tom Webb comparing the black arts to, quote, toxic chemicals requiring extra caution. And this, I believe, is somewhat depicted in Index 3, where a Toltec sorceress uses a Toltec grimoire which starts consuming her whole mind and body. Invoking Elementals. Later in Index Season 1, Index engages another person when invoking an Undine to heal her wounds. The 4 elements of ancient philosophy is one of the first to learn about when studying magic. Governed by the 5th element spirit or ether, the 4 elements rule 4 different kinds of beings known as elementals. Fire rules the salamanders, air the sylphs, water the undines, and earth the gnomes. More about these creatures can be found in the works of Eliphas Levi, who started the Grand Occult revival lasting 2 centuries. To perform the invocation, Index assigns some objects inside the room to herself and the other operator, giving them a different meaning for the time being. Then she enters a meditative state, enchanting and visualizing the angel similarly to a method outlined in New Age books and Angels and Archangels by Damian Eccles. She clarifies that an invocation is a thought form created by the wills of the participants, and I believe this hints into Crowley's and perhaps even John Fortune's definitions of magic. Magic is the art and science of causing changes to occur in conformity with the will. Crowley. Magic is the art of causing changes in consciousness to occur in accordance with the will. John Fortune. Supposedly, this also hints at the truth that angels, demons, and intelligences are also components of one's own psyche. The reason for calling the angel is that such invocations move top to bottom due to spirit's hierarchical order. A common way to summon up an undine in real life is by employing the supreme or greater invoking pentagram rituals, attuning the space to the corresponding element, which in such cases would be water. More on that can be found in virtually any book on Golden Dawn and Thelemic magic, such as on Scott Stanwyck's incredible blog. Crowley and Above the Abyss. We get the first introduction of Crowley at around the 18th minute of the same season, episode 6. That is in a place full of technology sustaining his health. More critical is that Crowley is positioned with his head down as if hanging from somewhere unknown. In my humble opinion, Kazuma Kamachi and JC Staff really didn't bother with this detail to merely give Crowley an extra eccentric presence. The reason is that as the Magus of the Aeon of Horus, Crowley achieved the second biggest task of Western magic, crossing the abyss. He claimed the Great of Magus, or 9 = 2, associated with the second Sephira in the Tree of Life Chokmah. It is said that all opposites are reconciled above the abyss and everything looks adversely below it. This notion is often used as a logical explication of why so many people misunderstood the Bible and the teachings of the person who happened to be Jesus Christ. Only exceptional magicians can cross the abyss, let alone achieve 9 = 2. It is often said that when they do it, they change themselves to such degree that they could become something entirely different and the total opposite of what people know them to be. Above the abyss, the black becomes white, the white black, and in the anime, Crowley appears hanging from above with his head down. This also reminds me that Crowley's look in the anime is quite the opposite of his actual look in real life. More about that can be found in Angels and Archangels by Damian Eccles, such as in Von Mailudiket's fascinating lecture on the Thoth Tarot. Runes. In the same episode, viewers are presented with the idea that the runes are the foundation of Old English. In real life, it is broadly accepted that Kabbalah is the fountain of the whole Western tradition, which heavily infuses the anime. Practitioners mainly spread this notion based on the Golden Dawn system, and the most iconic example is mystical Kabbalah, where the Fortune identifies Kabbalah as the yoga of the West and ancient Hebrew as the Western counterpart of Sanskrit. On the contrary, other occultists object that the original Western magic has its roots in the runes and the Nordic traditions. The argument is that unlike Kabbalah, which has been transported, runes originated in Europe. And that is a dynamic I believe Index's creators wanted to hint at with this mentioning of the runes and Old English. To those interested in the runes, I suggest the books and lectures of Dr. Stephen E. Flowers. Personal Reality. Episode 12 of Index Season 1 unveils the root of all Esper abilities. Excluding the physical predispositions, this essentially is the power of belief. To explain Esper powers, Miss Kamoe elaborates on extrasensory perception ESP in the context of Schrödinger's theory. The Esper teacher describes how absolute belief alters reality, especially when added to actual psychic abilities. Espers can separate themselves from reality, creating one strictly for themselves, changing the very fabric of their own micro-worlds. They use that to alter the objective. In the real world, variations of this concept appear in different books. One example is Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising, Chapter 1, The Thinker and the Prover. The section elaborates on how our brains are divided into a thinking and a proving brain. As long as the thinking brain thinks, or better yet, believes something unquestionably, the proving brain will eventually find ways to prove it and turn it into existence. Robert Anton Wilson explains that this is actually how many scientific discoveries were born. A similar notion is also found in the works of the biggest names of the New Thought movement, including Neville Goddard. In the next episode, Miss Kamoe brings the notion of RSPK, or Recurrent Spontaneous Psychokinesis Syndrome, poltergeisting. The teacher notes on Academy series methods to help Espers separate themselves from the objective, developing their abilities. Only when capable of doing that, they can quote-unquote awaken and begin creating those separate realities. On the contrary, when this separation results from stress or trauma, RSPK occurs and Espers use their abilities unconsciously and very destructively. This also conveys the principle of as above so below, as within so without, which is the most basic magical formula. It teaches that changing the macrocosm is only possible after changing the microcosm or the internal reality, and this calls for noting Don Webb's definition of magic. Magic is the art or science of causing change to occur in the microcosm, so a proportionate change will occur in the macrocosm depending on the passion and precision of the magician. Personal reality is also examined in episode 8 of Railgun Season 1, where another Esper teacher explains to a class they should explore quantum theory after understanding personal reality. The teacher further notes how personal reality and quantum theory are connected because both are rooted in probability. In the real world, I believe this gets best explained in Robert Anton Wilson's Quantum Psychology Section 4, Schrödinger's Cat and Einstein's Mouse. One of its key ideas is that we live in multiple reality tunnels, and by switching from one to another, we also change the world around us. Another is that those of us who are most receptive to placebos, using the power of belief to affect their bodies, also tend to be most perceptive of synchronicities, and supposedly Espers might be regarded as exceptionally talented in doing just that. Egregores. An AIM diffusion field is the phenomenon of Espers involuntarily emitting invisible energy through their bodies. Suffering the consequences of using a performance enhancer called the level upper, 10,000 low-level Espers end up in a nightmarish delirium in Railgun Season 1, Episode 12. When that happens, their minds and thoughts became connected in a network, forming a new entity that threatens the city. Regarded as an AIM burst, this implicates a concept best explained in the book by Mark Stavish, Egregores. An egregore is an autonomous psychic entity or thought form created by a group mind. If an egregore gets enough sustenance, it can take life on its own, turning into an independent deity which can be parasitic and destructive. Egregores can be created and sustained accidentally, like in Railgun Season 1, where the minds of those Espers get trapped in a network by the performance enhancer. On the contrary, egregores can also greatly benefit people's advancement and life. Such example is first encountered in Index Season 1, episodes 22, 23 and 24 in the face of the artificially created angel Hyoka Kazakiri. Described by Kamijo as quote-unquote physical manifestation of AAM diffusion fields and compressed psychic energy, Hyoka is mainly apparent to her friends who are basically the main characters. Nonetheless, her power isn't only in their heads, and she plays a crucial role in saving them during several conflicts, one of those being going against Gabriel in the Wasp battle after being sent by Aiwass. The Tree of Life. In the Angel Fall episode of Index, Kaoru Kanzaki, who is a saint and one of the most powerful magicians in the anime, brings the term Sephirotic Tree. Kanzaki refers to the Tree of Life as a chart of rankings depicting the souls of gods, angels, and humans. In reality, the Tree of Life is the central schema of Kabbalah and pretty much the entire Western tradition. It displays the manifestation and segments of the divine, such as the levels of consciousness and the whole human soul. It is said that the whole Kabbalistic wisdom is conveyed through the ageless glyph, which has an endless number of applications. In terms of rankings, it displays the hierarchy of angels and other divine beings. It is also used by magical orders to attribute their degrees to its spheres or Sephiroth. The Tree of Life has several divisions. One of them is the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, encompassing the hierarchy Kanzaki mentions. Attributed to the 4 elements and the 4 letters of Yod-Hei Vav-Hei, these worlds are 1. The archetypal or Atzilut, which is the most abstract and contains god names. 2. The creative or Bria or Braya, to be the home of archangels. 3. The formative or Yetzirah, to be indwelled by angels. And 4. The one of action or the physical, Asaya, which contains various spirits and intelligences. More about that can be learned in my series on the glyph. Another appearance of the Tree of Life or Etzkaim is encountered in the single season of Accelerator. The bad guy Rosenthal, who happens to be versed in Kabbalah, mentions he had to die 1,000 deaths to reach Keter. The hast in the tree, Keter or the crown, symbolizes divinity beyond duality. It is the one preceding all the vision and opposites, including good and bad, male and female, god and devil, etc. Orders like the Golden Dawn and the AA attribute Keter to the Great of Absissimus, which is usually considered impossible to reach by a living human. Accidental Magic. In Index Season 1, there is an angel fall of Gabriel, aka the power of God, triggered by the accidental combination of objects in the same place at the same time. This is done by Kamijo's father, who collected occult souvenirs and others. When moving with his wife into a new house, he haphazardly placed those, triggering the so-called angel fall. This reminds me of Crowley saying that all people do magic even without knowing, so it is best to actually learn how to do it properly. The 4 evil creatures. This reminds me of how in Accelerator, Hishitaga, a scientist working for a Karami series underworld, uses the help of necromancy to invoke the 4 evil creatures into mechanical bodies. In Chinese mythology, Hundum, Tao, Tauti, and Konki represent chaos, ignorance, gluttony, and deviousness. They are counterparts of the 4 celestial animals, which are the azure dragon, the vermilion bird, the black tortoise, and the white tiger. Within the anime, Hishitaga uses sigils and the powers of dead espers to embed those creatures' forces into 4 killing machines. The Invocation of Fire and Leo and the Unicursal Hexagram. Before doing a working in Index Season 1, Stau refers to the Book of Crowley. In reality, Crowley has many books. Far ahead of his time, Crowley is often considered the most prominent name of Western occultism. One of his books is accepted as the golden standard for Kabbalistic correspondences magicians use when constructing their invocations. This book is 777. When saving Index in this same situation, Stau and Kanzaki are about to invoke the fire element and the zodiacal sign of Leo, which is the fixed or cherubic sign of fire. After sharing those plans with Kamijo, Stau draws a large unicursal hexagram on the wall. Now, I always get a few associations when watching this. The first is that fire's properties include regeneration and recovery, such as healing illnesses and burning diseases. The second is that, like planetary and sephirotic, zodiacal invocations usually utilize hexagrams. I'm saying usually because the Golden Dawn offers elemental pentagrams for invoking zodiacal signs. The supreme invoking ritual of the pentagram of fire employs spirit active and fire invoking elemental pentagrams such as the sigils of Spirit and Leo. More on this can be found in the Golden Dawn by Israel Rigardi and Sandra Tabata and Chick Cicero. A common way to invoke constellations is by tracing the appropriate earth hexagrams and zodiacal signs. The Golden Dawn came up with their traditional hexagrams, which are basically two triangles interjecting in various ways. However, Stao Magnus draws a Unicursal hexagram. Invented by Giordano Bruno, the Unicursal hexagram became Telima's key symbol, and Crowley adopted it for an entire hexagram formula. Now that is outlined on par with the classic Golden Dawn method in books on Thelemic magic. Given this, the Unicursal hexagram can be used for invoking Leo. All required is using the appropriate solar version and the Leo sigil in the center. This describes Leo's version of the greater invoking hexagram ritual, which is used to tune in the field of operation so further conjurations of the corresponding entities can be performed. In the anime, Unicursal hexagrams are encountered on different occasions. Another example is when Misaka fights Mugino in Railgun S episode 8. The elements. During the different seasons, the concept of the elements is found in several places. One is in Toaru-Kagaku Accelerator, when Crowley is mentioned several times as the ruler of the 5 elements district. More exciting in my humble opinion is how the different organizations place the elements when doing magic. Although some people might object, I believe we can all agree that there are 2 main ways to place the elements in a circle when working microcosmically. Outlined in 99% of the books on Western magic and employed by Wiccan groups, the first is the winds model. The winds model places air in the east, fire in the south, water in the west, and earth in the north. In the anime, the winds model is used by the Roman Catholic Church and their inner organization, the Right Seed of God. Established and governed by the Pope, the Right Seed of God has 4 members representing the great archangels. Following the winds model, those members' names are Vento of the front, Fiamma of the right, Aqua of the rear, and Terra of the left. When working with a pentagram formula using the winds model, magicians face east, tracing air pentagram in the front, fire pentagram in the south, and water and earth pentagrams in the west and north. On the other hand, in episode 23 of Index Season 1, a sorceress called Sherry Cromwell casts a spell in the subway by swapping out the places of fire and air. Much more sense-making, this order places the elements based on their qualities and coexistence in nature. Each element possesses 2 out of 4 main qualities. Those are hot, dry, cold, and moist. To be placed next to each other, a couple of elements need to share one mutual quality. Fire and air are hot, air and water are moist, water and earth are cold, and earth and fire are dry. This depicts Aristotle's periodic table, existing centuries before the Golden Dawn started doing things the other way around. In more modern times, this method is also used by Jeff Rhodes and his organization, the Hermetic Order of the Round Table. The Book of the Woe. In episode 2 of Index Season 2, the viewers are presented with the notion that the Book of the Woe is a grimoire that has to be deciphered with the help of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The catch is that the Book of the Woe tricks everyone into decoding it differently. In real life, Liber Oveo Legis was dictated to Crowley in Cairo in April 1908 by his holy guardian angel Aiwass. The book comprises Thelema's central philosophy, Do What Thou Wilt. The first chapter is dictated by Nuit, the second by Hedit, and the third by Rahurquit or Horus, the conquering child. In real life, Crowley forbade deciphering and analyzing the book, instructing that every person should do that by themselves, finding their own truths. The Book of the Woe also declares the beginning of the Aeon of Horus or the conquering child, which succeeds those of Isis and Osiris and is broadly accepted as the one we currently live in. I'm saying broadly because some scholars argue that we live in the Aeon of Maat, whereas others in that of Set. An example of the latter are Don Webb and Michael A. Aquino, who actually published their own transcription of Liber Oveo Legis under the name of Overthrowing the Old Gods, Understanding Aleister Crowley and the Book of the Woe. The Hebrew alphabet, on the other hand, has an enormous significance for the whole Western tradition. Each letter is put on the Tree of Life and one of the 22 Tarot Major Arcana. Hebrew letters are part of virtually all Golden Dawn and Thelemic rituals and are attributed to elements, planets, zodiacal signs, and various qualities. Adonai. Traditionally, the word Adonai means my Lord. It is used by Jewish Kabbalists for turning to God. On the contrary, the Hermetic magician uses Adonai when speaking to their AGA. In Solomonic magic, it is very common for the operator to convince a demon that they are God. As they say, as long as the magician's link with the above is true and sure, so is the demon's link with the magician. I believe a similar dynamic is depicted in Accelerator episode 3, when a necromancer called Esther Rosenthal invokes a pseudo-soul within the body of a dead Esper. Serving and fighting for the necromancer, that character, Hirumi, calls Rosenthal Adonai whenever speaking to her. In real life, Esther is the main character of the Book of Esther, which is part of the Tanakh and the Old Testament. Having German and Ashkenazi origins, Rosenthal means Valley of Roses, and I think this name might be inspired by that of Christian Rosenkreuz, Dragon and Aiwass. In the anime, Aiwass makes his presence as a mysterious force called Dragon. When explaining what he is to the most powerful Esper in the anime, the Accelerator, Aiwass regards himself as an insignificant little being. As depicted in the anime, Aiwass is Crowley's holy guardian angel. The Draconian tradition is a left-hand path magical philosophy heavily inspired by mythical dragons and serpents. It works with those as a symbols, and it also works with deities like Lucifer, Lilith, Set and others, including Leviathan and Tiamat, who are actual dragons. Within this tradition, the term dragon really doesn't refer to an entity or spirit, but to a single or several forces forming a current. Another and more common attribution to the draconian or serpent force is the potential for development Kundalini. Emphasizing personal experience, the draconian system encourages the aspirants to customize their own practice, making it unique. More on that can be found in the works of Asenath Mason, especially in her draconian ritual, and the website of the Temple of Ascending Flame. In contrast, dragon magic doesn't require working with the mentioned deities and prioritizes working with draconic entities and elemental powers. In that regard, some sources describe dragons as somewhat similar to elementals but with much denser energy and powers. 5 = 6. 5 is the pentagram or the microcosm, and 6 is the divine or the macrocosm. The 5 = 6 grade of orders like the Golden Dawn and AA corresponds to the sphere of Tiferet. This is the first and most significant goal of the Western magician, obtaining knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. A notion consistent throughout the whole anime is that Academy City's top espers are 5 and they strive to become level 6, achieving ultimate power. I believe this is somewhat indirectly depicted in episode 25 of Index 3. There the Accelerator, the most powerful of those level 5s, understands there is no longer a need to be a villain. Invoking the Divine White through a sigil and the instructions Aiwass gave him, he realizes his true nature and purpose, as it happens with many magicians when obtaining their 5 = 6. Recognizing his divinity, the Accelerator finds out he is part of the ineffable, beyond good and evil, Magick and Science. On the other hand, there is also the notion that not all espers can achieve a stable level 6. In Railgun T, Kensei Hihara, who's a scientist conducting some pretty nasty experiments, attempts a level 6 shift on Mikoru Misaka, the third ranked of the top 5 espers. Although unsuccessful, the idea of this attempt is to make Misaka a quote-unquote vessel for the power of her numerous clones via the Misaka network. This is interesting because in an actual 5 = 6 ceremony, the candidate becomes a vessel for the White of the Angel. Yet when this is forced or somewhat improperly orchestrated, the consequences might be pretty catastrophic, like in the case of Misaka. Russia. Approaching its climax, the anime focuses on the World War III involving the Roman Catholic Church with its corrupted right seed of God, Russia, and the Academy City with its allies. Fiamma of the Right, a member of the right seed of God, who operates through the power of Mikhail, attempts to usurp the other elements. He does that by manipulating Nikolai Tolstoy, the bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church, to get Russia to attack Academy City. Besides the battleground for all those battles, Russia is also where the peace is restored. This partly happens through collaboration of some of the main characters and the local occult organizations and peoples. I don't think this is by coincidence. According to Gary Lachman, Russia is the only place where seemingly opposing spiritual ideas might coexist without any issues. Viewing Russia as one organic entity stretching throughout the whole continent, in his book The Return of Holy Russia, Lachman elaborates on Russia's spiritual truth and how its people will play a role in the future of humanity, which I think is somewhat hinted in the anime since some of them actually help the main characters. Mixing spiritual concepts, cutting-edge science and fiction that is yet to be invented, Project Toaru provides exceptional entertainment for occultists, especially Telemites. Making you resonate with the characters, it sucks you into its universe, which you want to explore more and more. Honestly, I really don't know what you've been doing if you're a practitioner and love anime but never heard of it. It combines epic battles with deeply touching scenes like those with Dolly and the Misaka sisters in Railgun. It also communicates the importance of camaraderie, friendship and community. The watching order I prefer is this: Index 1, Railgun 1, Index 2, Accelerator, Railgun 2, the movie, Railgun T, and Index 3. So go and watch it and maybe we can discuss it in the comment section below. So, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel if into this type of content, and perhaps to my other channel if into healthy living, natural bodybuilding, holistic nutrition and optimization. Also consider checking my book, music and blog. Thank you for your time.